All right, since you just checked the answer key to worksheet 7.3 with adding and subtracting like denominators, I'm now going to walk you through. I figured it might help a little bit for me to kind of walk you through this one. If you do have questions on the answer key that you just went over with my kind of ugly handwriting, please email me and I can always go back and give you feedback on that if you need it, okay? All right, for questions 1, 2, and 3, you're just simplifying for part A. So let's kind of look at that first. So we are going to factor out anything we can from the numerator, which it's a monomial, so we cannot. And then our denominator, we're going to factor out a GCF of 2x. So we are left with 2x minus 1. So we have our numerator and we have our denominator. So what happens is a 2 divided by 2 is 1, and x divided by x is 1. Remember, you're left with a 1 on top. So your final answer, I'm sorry, is 1 all over 2x minus 1. Now, to answer part B, which is list the values of x that are excluded from the domain, we basically are asking ourselves, so I'm going to pull up a note to kind of remind you what we did here, but we're asking ourselves, when will the denominator, which is 2x minus 1, equal 0? Because remember, when you divide by 0, that's called undefined. So we would have to exclude that value from our domain. So all I'm going to do is some pretty easy junior high algebra here, which is solve for x. And so what happens is you should have the values of x that are excluded. So 1/2 would be a value for x, and the only value for x that we would not want to plug in for x, okay? So just to kind of remind you where we're getting that from. Come on, note. Okay. All right. For number 2, let's go back and kind of start from scratch. So we're going to factor the numerator. Remember, you're always going to look to factor first before canceling. So this is a difference of squares. And then the bottom we can't do anything with. Now we have a binomial b minus 1 on the top and a binomial. So our final answer is b plus 1. And then this one might be a little bit easier to figure out, but the value of b, this would be b plus 1 over 1, right? So the values of x that are excluded, since our denominator is 1 and we're not dividing by any variable, we can plug in whatever we want. So the values of x that are excluded, there are no values that are excluded. I almost forgot. Now you can write that final answer as b plus 1, but I put it over 1 to show you that the denominator is actually just a number. And because b is not down there, we don't have to worry about ever dividing by 0 because we're always going to divide by 1. So there is nothing excluded from our domain. For number 3, let's take a look. We're going to factor out a GCF from the numerator. The denominator would be a leading coefficient of 1. It's a trinomial. So that would factor into x plus 5 times x plus 5. I hope you're feeling more confident with your factoring by now. So I can cancel out a factor from the top and the bottom. And my final answer would be 2 all over x plus 5. Now, the value for x that would make this denominator 0 would be negative 5. So that kind of is a review of 7.1. Hopefully you brought your binder home and you have those notes in your binder, but that is just simplifying and talking about what values are restricted in the domain. Okay, and there you focus on the denominator. Whoa. All right. So now let's take a look at multiplying and dividing. So remember, we really want to factor everything that we can first. So I am going to factor the denominator, which would be x plus 1 times x plus 1. Now remember, we're dividing, so I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal. And then x squared minus 1 will go on the top, but I'm going to go ahead and factor that because that is a difference of squares. So now you have everything that you can factor. Now, remember, instead of multiplying across the top and bottom, it can be ugly. Let's cancel factors into themselves first. So we have an x plus 1 and an x plus 1. X divided by itself is 1, and x squared divided by x would be just x. So on the top we have x times x minus 1. In the denominator we have x plus 1 times 1, which is x plus 1. That would be your answer there. So what's good is you can always pause this video, look at your work. Do not throw away your work, obviously, because that's what you're going to check. Okay? All right. Number 5 is multiplying, so we don't have to worry about, doing anything to this second fraction. So we're going to leave everything. Let's just factor. So we have a plus 3, and then we would have a plus 4 times a plus 3. And I believe that gives us, oh no, let me erase this, my bad. That would be a minus 3 because we're looking for a negative 12 product. Okay, that's good. Now let's multiply. I'm going to do the denominator first because I can tell it's a difference of squares and get that out of the way. And then we would be doing a plus 4 and a plus 3. Okay, so we have everything factored in each individual fraction. Now let's cancel, and then we'll worry about multiplying across the top and bottom. So let's see, we have a plus 3 goes into a plus 3. A plus 4 goes into a plus 4. And I think that's it. So our numerator would be 1 times a plus 3, which is a plus 3. On the bottom, we have a minus 3 times itself. Now you can write that as a minus 3 times a minus 3, but I'm going to write it as a minus 3 squared. And there is nothing else you can do in that problem. It is finished. So I'm just double checking to make sure that I factored that second fraction right, and it looks okay. All right. And our last one is a big old division problem. So here we go. I'm going to start with this first fraction. And you know what? I'm going to need more room. So I'm going to erase everything first so I can keep us organized. All right. So let's factor out, this is number 6, a 6x squared, and we are left with x minus 1. In the denominator, I'm going to factor out an x to the third, and I'm left with x plus 5. Now let's multiply by the reciprocal. Now, the denominator was 2x squared plus 2x minus 40. That's going to go on the top, but I'm going to go ahead and factor out a GCF to kind of eliminate a lot of writing. So I have 2 times x squared plus x minus 20. And the denominator, which was the numerator, I can factor out a GCF of 3. So I'm left with 3 times the quantity of x squared minus 5x plus 4. Now I'm pretty sure we're going to have to do some more simplifying here. So let's keep going. I'm going to scroll this and put it up in the middle. So we have this first fraction is perfectly, perfectly fine. 6x squared times x minus 1 all over x to the third times x plus 5. Now, let's see, what multiplies together to give me negative 20 and adds to 1? That would be a positive 5 and a negative 4. And then down here, what multiplies to give you 4? Let's see, and gives you, that would be minus 1 and minus 4. Okay, now we have everything in every numerator and denominator factor. So here we go. So I'm going to do binomials first. I think you guys feel comfortable doing those. I'm going to cross those off first. Wowza. Now, 3 divided by 3 is 1, and 6 divided by 3 is 2. And then we have x squared goes into itself one time, and then we would have an x left. So I'm going to write our final answer over here. So on the top, it looks like we literally just have a 2 times 2, which is 4. And on the bottom, we just have x times 1. So that big old ugly problem simplifies to cute little 4 over x. And our last 3 problems are just adding and subtracting. So I should hopefully be able to speed up a little bit. So in this first problem, we're going to leave our denominator the same. That's 2x to the 5th. And when we add the top, 9, 10, 11, 12, that gives us 12x to the 3rd. It's a 3. And then now we can kind of simplify. So 2 divided by 2 is 1, 12 divided by 2 is 6. And then x to the 3rd divided by x to the 3rd is 1, and x to the 5th divided by x to the 3rd is x squared. So there you're left with 6 over x squared. Number 8, we are going to really focus on subtracting this binomial. So you're going to subtract 2x minus 1. I really want to stress, like they did in the video, how important it is to not mess up this subtraction. So that means we are going to have 8x plus 9 minus 2x minus 1 all over 18. So an 8x minus 2x is 6x, and a 9 minus 1 is 8. So we did subtract. Now what we have to do is we have to go back and simplify. So I'm going to factor out a GCF of 2. So I'm left with 3x plus 4 all over 18. And then since 2/18 reduces to 1/9, your answer would be 3x plus 4 all over 9. So the last problem, you just want to be really careful that you are making sure that I'm going to use a lot of space here just to kind of make sure. So I'm going to subtract 6x squared minus 12x. When you do this problem, please make sure that you are distributing that negative. So we're going to subtract 6x squared, and we're going to subtract a negative. So we have 8x squared minus 6x squared plus 12x all over our original denominator that was the same in both fractions. So now we added the top and got 2x squared plus 12x all over 10x to the 3rd plus 60x. So we did subtract. Now we're just going to simplify. So we have a GCF of 2x. So I'm left with 2x times the quantity of x plus 6 all over. In the denominator, I can factor out a GCF of 10x squared, and I am left with x plus 6. So now, just to simplify, we can cancel. And so our final answer is 1 all over 5x. And that's it. Good job.